Video game controllers. We all know them, we all need them when playing. I've been thinking lately, what Nintendo controller did it best? The feel, the ease of use, and most importantly, comfort. Some context before we start ranking these controllers. I'm only going to be covering controllers that came bundled with each mainline Nintendo console going in order. I'll be rating them based on how important they were at release, how they compared to their competitors, and how much they hold up today. Going over the pros and cons of each one. Feel free to tell me your favourite controller in the comments section, and with that out of the way, let's start with the Nintendo Entertainment System, or Famicom over in Japan. Compared to what came before, it was a huge step up, introducing the standard going forward with its directional pad alongside start and select buttons. Compared to other systems on the market, it wasn't anything too different, and with the release of the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis in the US introducing a whopping third button, how were they ever going to follow up on this? Comfort wise, it wasn't exactly there, with its small size and sharp edges, but being what it had to be in 1995, prioritising short gaming sessions with platformers and arcade releases, it did what it had to fine. Personally, I prefer what Japan had with its red and gold design, very classy. The second controller also supported a mic for use in certain titles. Overall, a great starting point for the industry, but as games were getting more and more complex, we needed the next step soon. Since this will be the standard going forward, I'm feeling a strong C tier. Oh, now here's where things get interesting. The Super Nintendo controller. How did Nintendo clap back against the Mega Drive's 3 face buttons in 1990? How about 4 face buttons, along with an L and R bumper for each side? The D-pad along with start and select are still here, so in every way this is an improvement from the NES. Curved, convex edges made longer gaming sessions a breeze, which was needed at this point with all the incredible RPGs released for this machine. For its time, this was perfection and still holds up amazingly for most 2D platformers that get released today, along with a surprising amount of indie games. I guess if I were to look for a negative, the US version of this controller axed the colours, opting for this strange set of pill-like purples. They remind me of these sweets in the UK and kinda give the controller a tacky look in my opinion. Just a nitpick, but that really says how amazing this controller really is. A tier. Here's where things get a little confusing. In 1996, Nintendo released the Nintendo 64. 3D, more experimental games were taking the world by storm, and what is the controller we got? The N64 controller, very unconventional even for today, but down from 4 face buttons back to just 2. Now we have an extra shoulder button with Z, along with a brand new analog stick, a standard at this point, as well as a set of C buttons which were usually used as a replacement second analog stick. Also no select button this time, just start. Devs really had to get creative with the lack of buttons, having you hold down the Z button whilst hitting another input to make up for this. There's been a bit of a meme cursing this controller on how you're supposed to hold it. Allow me to demonstrate. This was the config for 2D platformers, and this was the config for literally anything else. One huge pro for this controller is the comfort. Compared to the original PlayStation controller that had short handles which gave me hand cramps, the N64 I found myself never getting hand cramps from. The analog stick also has a lot of degrees of movement, with the travel making the system's main library 3D platformers extremely responsive. This was also the era where variants started to be released. The N64 had some amazing ones, with the transparent green being my personal favourite. Using this controller for modern games, however, is a nightmare, and the layout which made it stand out for better or worse makes it a no for all modern releases. B tier. Here we go, the cream of the crop, all reliable, the GameCube controller, released in 2001. It's hard not to be biased with this one, the first controller I remember holding, but I'll try not to be. This really is a blend of all the good from previous controllers. You got the 4 face buttons from the SNES with a new ergonomic design, the analog stick along with a much needed C stick from the N64, along with the same shoulder buttons, however this time they are analog triggers making many degrees of input possible. The best example is Flood from Mario Sunshine, or the light shielding in Smash Melee. The D-pad has been shrunken down and moved to the bottom left, which is probably the only criticism I can think of for this controller. Granted, there were next to no 2D platformers out for the GameCube, so it was mainly used as an input opposed to movement. Also, wish it had 4 shoulder buttons instead of 3, since it could have been used for a lot of modern games this way. But yeah, what is there more to say? This is definitely a fan favourite for a reason, with Nintendo supporting this controller for every system up to this day with the Switch. Also, shoutouts to the Pumpkin Spice controller, this is a vibe. Now if we could just stop the Smash Melee community from lowering their population. A tier. So what happened here? The year is 2006, motion controls were starting to become the next big trendy thing with gaming, and Nintendo got in ahead of its competition with the Wii. Taking most influence from its roots with the NES, we have a D-pad along with Start and Select is back. Now we have an A button in the center and a B button that is very satisfying to use on the back. The controller was extremely versatile, allowing for a vertical position for more action-intense games, and a horizontal position usually for 2D platformers, which were making their nostalgic return at this point. But that's not all. Flip the controller and here we have a port, practically a skeleton key for the Wii remote. There were so many configs from this one port alone. Most well known is the nunchuck, which allowed for 3D games to be played, and if you hated the Wii's unconventional layout, you could just straight up plug in a regular standard controller with classic controllers. Personally, I love the motion sensor design with the Wii remote. Sure, it wasn't a GameCube controller, but the amount of creativity here is amazing. In particular, I really miss the old infrared aiming that was achieved with the sensor bar for shooters in particular, like Metroid Prime. This was so smooth and felt like the only way to play. This generation would also introduce the Wii Motion Plus accessory, which made gyro aiming possible, which is still used in modern Nintendo games like Splatoon, and is a must for me personally when playing any shooting game. Later on in this console generation, competitors Sony and Microsoft would attempt their take on the trendy motion controller pie with the PlayStation Move and Xbox Kinect, which whilst financially successful, never had the charm and innovation the Wii remote introduced. A tier is a more divisive controller within the community. Most people believe this controller is the reason the Wii U underperformed, with ads making the new system look like just a controller for the Wii. The Wii U gamepad, personally a favourite of mine. If you have a small pair of hands, I could see you being put off. However, if you're rocking a pair of big meaty claws, this controller is extremely comfortable. We have a modern control layout with all the inputs you could need. We got the D-pad, start and select, face buttons, 4 shoulder buttons this time, making it more in line with standard control layout, as well as 2 analog sticks, which you can push inwards allowing for an extra input. But that's not all. A 480p 6-inch touchscreen, gyro accelerometer and an NFC scanner is also included, along with a front-facing camera. Wow, that's a lot. Some might even say overboard, but out of the few games that took advantage of the features, they were a lot of fun. Having a display on the bottom screen makes menu navigation seamless and smooth with no pausing in games like in Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD. Always having a map made the UI of a lot of games look really clean, with the only issue being having to sometimes tilt your neck to look down. On the topic of holding up, the form factor of the Wii U clearly influenced the Switch, which in turn influenced the Steam Deck alongside all the other PC handheld hybrids that seem to release every week. So yeah, from a controller perspective, the Wii U gamepad was amazing, and the only issue was its short battery life, which could be expanded, and its Bluetooth signal being cut out because of a phone interfering or being too far away from the console. Also, they were a pain getting replaced. Nintendo never gave the option to buy these separately. I think they were planned, but due to poor sales was probably axed alongside tons of other cool ideas. A tier. Which brings us to today, the Nintendo Switch Joy-Con controllers. Let's start with the positives. They have every input you could possibly need. The NFC and gyro is back from the Wii U. The variants are some of the best we've ever seen out of a controller. The detachable controllers are really comfortable and a unique concept that I wish we got more of. The tabletop position is a personal favourite of mine. We even have extra buttons with the SL and SR along with a neat capture button for screenshots and gameplay. Now for the negatives, getting the biggest one out of the way, drift, a huge issue plaguing most modern controllers. However, it is most evident with the Switch's Joy-Con. This renders them useless unless you fork over some money to get them repaired, with them probably reoccurring later on. Also, back to the NES with ergonomics, this controller is extremely uncomfortable for long sessions. If you have big hands, I'd highly recommend a grip or some other kind of accessory. I know I mentioned I would only be ranking these controllers based on what you get with the console, but the Pro Controller really does remedy a ton of issue with the Joy-Cons, so the Switch can be played with a ton of comfort. If you like the Joy-Cons, please let me know in the comments. I'm curious. I really don't want to dislike them, and I'm hoping Nintendo improves on them with the Switch's successor, so here's hoping. C tier. There you have it, my subjective list on Nintendo controllers. At the top we have GameCube, followed by the Wii U gamepad, the Wii Remote, then the SNES controller, the N64, followed by the Joy-Cons with the NES controller, which is how it should be, being as it was the first attempt. At the end of the day, this was just a bit of fun, and me letting out my opinions on each controller. We spend thousands of hours with these things, so it's important to know what makes a good or a bad one. Really curious what we'll see next from Nintendo. They feel like the only company that's willing to take risks over the generic control scheme we've had for decades, and it really shows how specific controllers for certain games can really enhance an experience. If you got to the end of this video, I really appreciate you making it this far, and any feedback in the comments would be appreciated. This is my first time making a ranking list, and can definitely see the joy in it. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.